Howdy, folks. Today's show is going to be a storm, quite literally. We're talking about storm chasing photography and time lapsing right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Lutz, and before we get started, I've got one thing to ask of you. Over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are not actually subscribed to this channel. Come on, folks, let's change that. Just hit that subscribe button. It helps me get even cooler guests on the show. Although, as I always say, I don't even think that's possible anymore. One click, that is all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's welcome today's special guest, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, photographer, and storm chaser. Please give it up for Mr. Mike Olbinski. Mike, how's it going?
Hey, it's going good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm not just saying that. I've actually been looking at your images for absolutely ever. The whole idea of storm chasing to me is, on one hand, it's super exciting. On the other hand, is absolutely nuts. I mean, how did you first get into chasing storms?
First off, you have to really like storms and weather, I think, to be a storm chaser. So it's not something you're like, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could fall in love with it if you didn't before, because I know plenty of people who have been afraid of storms and then suddenly experience them and get over their fear and then really enjoy them. But for me, at least, I just grew up loving weather, loving looking at lightning. I think my dad probably helped instill that in me. We'd watch a lot of thunderstorms, and we live in Phoenix, Arizona, which is a desert, and so we don't get a lot of rain and storms. But in the summer, we get monsoon season, and we get thunderstorms, and we get huge downpours. We get big lightning bolts towering because the bases of our clouds are so high, and when it's at summer, it's like 108 degrees Fahrenheit here, and a thunderstorm rolls through. It drops into like the 70s. So when you live in a desert, you just, relish the storms. Like, it brings life, it brings cool temperatures, it brings, water. Like, it's something that everybody here loves if you're from this place. So I grew up just naturally loving it and loving lightning. And at some point in my life, I was on Wonderground or .com before, when people used to be able to submit photos, and I was just fascinated with lightning and lightning photography ever since I was a little kid, but more so the photography part later. And I was like, I want to learn how to do that. And so that's kind of what got me into it, is I wanted to learn how to shoot lightning, and then eventually, realized I couldn't do it a block from my house. I'd never see anything. So I'd actually have to go out and start chasing and get closer if I wanted to do better.
See, to me, that's like immediately totally weird because it's sort of, almost like the polar opposite of my experience growing up here in Europe. It's the thing like where, yeah, I mean, I live in the UK, so, we're always glad when there's not a storm, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So, give me a sunny day, any day,
Yeah.
But where you are in Phoenix or in the Arizona desert, is that part of what's commonly known as Tornado Alley? Is that some part of that?
No, no. Yeah, we are like just east of California. So I am a good, I would say 12-hour drive. I can get to like Texas, New Mexico border in about 10 and a half, 11 hours. And I would say eastern New Mexico is kind of where the Tornado Alley starts. It's the if you know where the Rocky Mountains are in the United States, they kind of go through the middle of New Mexico up through Colorado, mostly like the western half of Colorado, up through like Wyoming and stuff in Montana. And everything kind of east of there is where dry air gets like funneled into the plains, and then moist air from the Gulf comes up, and that's kind of where Tornado Alley is. Um, I saw a land spout tornado here a few years ago, just randomly. And so we'll get them, but not, it's a dry, beautiful, desert with epic skies and thunderstorms, in the summer.
That's the thing I love about deserts. I'm actually a little bit of a desert freak. So
Yeah.
when I was a teenager, I used to travel through a number of deserts with my mom. of all people,
Mm.
especially the Sahara Desert and the Chott el Djerid, which is like
Wow.
a salt desert in southern Tunisia, Algeria, and things like that. And I've always loved the whole aesthetics, I suppose, of a
Yeah.
desert. Because the thing that fascinates me is not only these wide, massively wide open skies, um, that color contrast between the blue sky and the sort of ochre, you know, uh, beige. That's probably why I love the color beige so much. My wife always makes fun of me because I'm like, give some
Yeah.
khakis any day. She's like, oh
Yeah, yeah,
God,
yeah.
everything you wear is
It's
beige.
boring. Yeah.
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 Um, but so what is it that sort of fascinates you about storms?
Oh, it's a really tough question. It's kind of like, why do any of us like anything? Like, what a fast I don't know what it is. There's a power and a beauty and a majesty, and at least for me, when I look at storms, I will see God in storms. Like, this is like, no one could. I mean, the amount of supercells and storms I've chased and lightning I've chased, and how many of them look different every single time is like astounding. Like, you are like, hey, a supercell forms with rotation in the atmosphere and moisture and wind direction and speed and like all this stuff and cape and temperature and dew point and all these ingredients. And you can be on a storm and go, this storm is unique and I will never see it again, even though the mechanics and the means for that storm are there all the time. And so, you know, when we see photos, when you've been chasing for a while and you see photos of a certain storm like the Booker supercell in 2013, everybody knows it was Booker, and no one will probably the odds of seeing anything that looks remotely like that is like incredibly rare. And when you've been chasing forever, you're able to go, oh, that was Leota, that was Dodge City, that was this and this, just by seeing. And granted, you've seen a bunch of pictures, so you kind of know, but you're like, there's been a couple storms that I've mad been going like, oh, this looks a lot like this one a few years ago. But I think that's what's so fascinating, especially with lightning for me. Talking about Europe, and you go to like the Eiffel Tower and take pictures of the Eiffel Tower. All you're really going to be able to do is get a different sky, maybe try to get really lucky and get sunset or a storm. I mean, if you get lucky and get a storm behind it, that would be fantastic for me. It's all I'd want. But out here, you can be in the Arizona desert or anywhere on the tornado alley and get photos and get lightning bolts that no one has ever seen before and probably will never see again. I mean, that's what drew me to lightning anyway, is almost every single lightning bolt is different everywhere I go. I'm trying to shoot on the fly. I'm trying to make kind of things happen without planning, and you'll get a strike and you'll be like, that no one's ever going to get that again. That's mine. I have the only shot of that, and it can't be repeated with like another nice sunset in the Eiffel Tower in the way, kind of thing. So I think for me, it's always something different, and exciting, and it keeps you coming back because you don't get bored because it's always different.
It's interesting. You were talking about the mechanics of a storm like that. Um, that very much reminds me of some time I spent up in the Lofoten Islands in Arctic Norway,
Mhm.
where a friend of mine, Dave Williams, is one of the world's, I guess, foremost trackers of the aurora.
Mhm.
Um, and it's a similar thing. You have no two auroras are ever the same. It always looks different. But what fascinated me was how many data points Dave tracks every day to know exactly what's happening when the solar flares are happening and stuff like that. And part of the workshop that we did up there was he did an aurora masterclass, really going into detail about the whole the mechanics of the aurora. Because I didn't know. I mean, I
Yeah.
never seen the aurora before. I never seen the northern lights before that. I didn't know how any of this even worked.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned a storm supercell. What are the mechanics of a storm like that? How does that? What is a supercell, and how does that actually happen? How does that come to life?
It's kind of insane, but so like in Arizona and maybe typical places, there's a lot of you'll get thunderstorms, and in general, a lot of them are kind of what we call like popcorn pop-up thunderstorms, where they build up and then they kind of collapse on themselves. Where the big updraft is like this explosion of moisture and energy going up, and then at some point it gets too heavy and then it rains down and there's lightning and all this stuff. So out here we get a lot of those, and it's the monsoon, and for the most part, that's what they do. They go up, and if I'm chasing them, I better be right there before they collapse because that's what I'm trying to capture on time lapse, and that's when like the lightning will start happening. Excuse me, and then it rains out, and you got to hope there's more storms being created. Um, I don't know why I start coughing. Sorry. Um, a supercell is like a thunderstorm that doesn't die. Like, so out here, a monsoon thunderstorm can go up and be dead in like 30, 40 minutes, and that's it. You don't really chase it as much as you're trying to be there. A supercell is kept alive by mechanics in the atmosphere where wind speeds are different, at different elevations. So at the surface, they might be coming in from the southeast, which is generally the direction when you get good supercells. It can be a little different from time to time, but the Gulf of Mexico, not America, is where, sorry, I don't want to get political, but the Gulf of Mexico, the moisture gets pulled up through like Texas and all across the Central Plains. And that's generally coming from the southeast. It's getting blown up there. But then there's upper level winds that are going from a different direction, like out of the southwest, or sometimes winds will be coming out of the northwest and they collide. And so what they do is as the air's going up, they're twisting. So when a thunderstorm goes up, it'll start rotating and start tilting, and the moisture that's getting pulled into the updraft will rain out kind of in front of it, which keeps the base relatively like safe or free. And as the storm is moving, it's still pulling in moisture, and rain is coming out and falling, and it stays alive. And I've chased a supercell from Denver, Colorado, all the way into Kansas, like 350 miles over 6 hours. And it just went southeast for 6 hours, chased it from like 12:30, 1 o'clock all the way till past sunset. And one of the longest, I mean, and so that one storm stayed alive for 6 hours. And supercells rotating, that's where you get the tornado potential too, as they can become surface based, and really a lot of up and down mechanics can cause a tornado to form. So that's where you get most tornadoes, is from like a supercell thunderstorm.
I mean, I remember watching TV shows, like Storm Chase, or I can't
Hmm.
remember what they call it, but storm chasing type TV shows, and I'm always sort of flabbergasted, really, by the destructive power of those things. Um, so chasing these storms to me is almost like an insane way of putting your own life into danger. Um,
Yeah.
I I mean, how close do you get to those storms?
Um, well, so this last year I had my closest like tornado intercept ever, which was like a quarter mile away behind one that was kind of moving southeast, and I was on the west side of it. So I stood out in the middle of a road shooting it a quarter mile down the road with hail falling around, and I never felt like safer. Like I just am like, when you know where a tornado is, it's pretty easy to avoid it if it's not moving at like 50 miles an hour really fast and stuff. Um, for me, I don't know if, for me, the danger mostly is in lightning, because I'm around the lightning all the time, because that's my main focus out here in Arizona. But the amount of lightning strikes out there that have hit close, to me when I've been chasing, has been way more dangerous than any tornado I've been near. Um, Lightning can kind of strike anywhere, and so that part is pretty dangerous. But once you've been doing it for a while and understand how to look at radar and road network, and to really be prepared. I think what happens to a lot of um, chasers when they're a little too they might be a little too reckless or a little too sucked into what they're doing. I happen to have been leading tour groups, small little tour groups in my truck since like 2015. So I kind of had this bigger responsibility to be safer than maybe I should be, or that I could be if I was by myself. By myself, I might do things different. Um, but I have that in my brain. And even this last spring had one of the freakiest. definitely the freakiest chase ever in Iowa, where we had 55-mile-per-hour moving storms, and tornadoes were dropping out of. I mean, it felt like a made up movie where I'd be like, no, that's just twisters where tornadoes are just dropping out. No, but this was like legit. Like we escaped one tornado. And then my tour guest, like, the clouds are really weird right above us when we're only 2 miles down the road, and another tornado formed behind us. And then as we kept going east, another one formed. Like, we saw like 4 tornadoes that day and barely got any photos because all we were doing is running for our lives. And that was a situation that I don't chase a lot of these like fast moving cold front things in Iowa, where I like slower moving photogenic storms that I can time lapse and take my time with. That time is like, hey, we're gonna go see what we can see today. And boy, we got an experience. But the thing was, is even in that situation, I was on the cusp of a tornado. Like we were probably in the outer circulation, but other chasers got hit by them, and they all were fine and stuff. But even then, I was like, I have 3 guests with me, 2 guys from China, a guy from Australia. Like, they're getting experience, but we are gonna be safe. And it's literally like, "Hey, guys, we're gonna be running right now to make sure we're out of the way of these things, and then when it's safe, we will figure out what we're doing next." Like, that today is not about trying to get close and all this stuff. This is pretty dangerous. There's a lot of cars on the road and stuff like that. Um, so even with that, I try to be prepared and know my escape routes and stuff like that, and that can really just save you, most of the time. So, after a while, you're like, "Oh, I know. Like, this looks scary, but we just drop south, or we just go east and we're out of the way in like a half mile, we'll be fine." So, um, it gets used to it. If you haven't done it, it seems really frightening. If you're in someone's car, I had an author from England with us this last year. We didn't really get in a lot of dangerous stuff, but she was like, "I'm going to do research for a book, and I'm terrified of storms, so this should be interesting." And she was great and quiet and mature, but I could tell she was, she's never met me before. She's trusting that I know what I'm doing. And for her being in that situation, probably pretty freaky, kind of being under these clouds and bolts striking all around us and stuff. You know, but that's what I do. So
I mean, it really it's super interesting because it really, there's lots of parallels to, um, tracking and finding and photographing the Northern Lights because,
yeah.
a lot of the things that you mentioned are really very, very much in parallel. Like, for example, you know, knowledge of the terrain, for example, is super important, especially up into the Fulton Islands where you've got 3,000
Hmm.
foot mountains and, and you could be looking at, that could be, the Northern Lights could be happening right in front of you, but because you're on the wrong side of the mountain, you're just looking at a black wall, in the
Right.
dark, and you're not going to see
Yeah.
anything. So knowing
Yeah.
where to be in relation
Yeah.
to the landscape is super important. This is the thing that I've always found super fascinating, about what Dave does. Um, what sort of data points do you track in order to understand what the storm is doing and how it's potentially developing and where it's going to be in 30 minutes time? Like, what sort of data points do you track?
Well, I mean, first off, there's a lot of forecasting that goes into this. I'm not a meteorologist, and but I've learned a ton over the last like 15 years or whatever. And so a lot of knowing what a storm is doing is almost predicting it ahead of time, knowing like, hey, 48 hours from now, there's a good likelihood of a supercell going up in Texas, maybe near the town of Childress. And this literally happened a few years ago where the models were showing a storm west of Childress going up around 2 o'clock, and it would travel southeast. And I know it's going to travel southeast because the upper level winds are out of the northwest, and it's going to push it that way. And so I can look at all these parameters and go, oh, southeast moving storms, guess what? They usually have really nice structure. They're slower moving, things like this that I know. I know where it's going to start. I know the amount of shear in the atmosphere, the moisture, what it can do. I know there's probably not going to be a tornado chance because the moisture isn't as good. All these things ahead of time. And then I show up, and then that's kind of where the fun is, which is the storm actually fired west of Childress like it was supposed to. And And then all of a sudden it dove southeast like the models kind of predicted it would because of the flow and all that kind of stuff. But then it's like, but it's not precise. So then I got to figure out what's the best side of the storm to be on? What road do I need to get down so I can stay in front of this? Do I need to just go race ahead for like 40 minutes to get to a new spot so I can get it coming at me? Or am I really lucky and have a good zigzaggy road where I can stop every few miles and keep shooting? So a lot of that is just, figuring out, looking at the radar. You animate the radar on a loop. You can see, sometimes, a lot of times they have storm tracks that show the general direction. It's not always precise, but you can kind of um, gauge where it's going to go and what direction is where it might pass. And then I have a whole master class on all this stuff as well. And a lot of like supercell photography is knowing how to position yourself around a supercell to get certain shots. The mothership shot in like on the east side in the bear's cage, or south side, where you might get more of the updraft, or the backside. Like there's all these different places that you might want to be. And so it's all different strategies of what you're trying to get. And a lot of it is just, looking at the storm and knowing, even like with supercells, they can look really good for hours and hours, but then sometimes right around sunset, there's something called the cap builds back in, which is almost like kind of flattening the storm a little bit. And that's where the structure can get even better. Like it can become all like pancakey, or they say like a big wedding cake where there's just stripe. Like it can be, so that, hey, I want to be somewhere good for sunset, because that's when it could be the best. And so all that stuff kind of goes into, what you're trying to do and how you're trying to position and track it all.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. I mean, you mentioned that there's a certain degree of unpredictability in this, and of course, no forecasts are ever perfect. What's the chance that things can go sideways with something like that? Because I'm thinking, with Northern Lights, I mean, okay, so if they, so they're not in that direction, but in the other direction, well, that's fine. You just turn around. It's no big deal, really.
Yeah.
What, in the worst case
Yeah,
scenario,
but
you just don't see
if you are someplace and they're 300 miles east of you, then you're like, no, so it's not just point my camera a different direction, but it's not really good right here. I need to go east 300 miles to be right underneath it, And so that's the same thing. I mean, we had a few years ago, one of the biggest like busts of all time, where we were in kind of west central Kansas, because the models had a beast of a supercell going up there, and it was tornado weather and all this stuff. But they also showed storms to the south, maybe close to the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle, and Nebraska. And so they're chasers all over the place, spread out on like 3 major targets. Most of us picked the Kansas one because it's just isolated beast. Well, guess what? We all got screwed because our storm kept trying to go up and died. Went up, died. Like it just did not happen. And we just kept going south until finally we end up on another storm that went up, and we're finally like, this is it. This is it. And it went up and we followed it and it died. And we were like, okay, let's get a hotel. And other people in Nebraska got a freaking like 4 tornadoes and all this stuff. And people south got a tornado, and we busted hard. And that's kind of the same thing. Is like, yeah, there's a lot of accuracy these days with weather data and weather models and predicting where storms are going to be. But again, weather will do what it wants. And we can be on the biggest days. Like I think we had another high risk day this last spring, which out here where we have severe weather levels that the Storm Prediction Center is in Oklahoma, and they predict severe weather for the entire country. And so they have certain levels where it's marginal, there's a slight risk, there's a enhanced risk, there's a moderate risk, and there's a high risk, and high risk being the worst. And I've chased like 3 or 4 high risks in my career, and almost every single one has been a bust. Like, doesn't happen like they think. And this last year, of course, another high risk day. Everyone's worried because of all the cars in the road, and luckily we're all spread out. And there might have been a tornado during the day that I was on, but I couldn't see it because too much rain. And then there was one late at night that was insane that everyone gave up, and it happened way after dark. So that was kind of like, man, this is a high risk day where every storm should be a tornado. Like everyone's going nuts, and then it didn't happen. And that's what happens. It's like you can't predict it, you know. Luckily for me, and maybe, someone like you who's a photographer and a time lapser, I don't necessarily need a tornado for me to have a good day. If I get a good supercell and good structure and some lightning, I had a great time. So it's the tornado chasers that people are looking for mainly one thing that can get disappointed pretty fast.
I mean, with that degree of unpredictability and, yeah, and the potential danger, you know, do you need any, like, specialized equipment?
Usually just your phone. These
Right.
days you can just, for the most part. No, but I mean, seriously, like your phone, as long as you have data, you've got GPS, you got Google Maps, you've got like Radar Scope or Radar Omega, got two great weather apps that will update every 2 minutes, showing you where you are, showing you where lightning bolts almost hit exactly, showing you the roads on it. So that's kind of, really all you really need. But there's levels to it too, where you can go chase in places like Southeast Colorado, Northwest, the Oklahoma Panhandle, where like Verizon data kind of dies out. So you wish you had AT&T. So I have
Yeah.
an AT&T hotspot built into my truck, and I also have a Verizon hotspot. Well, now people are using Starlink,
Right.
um, because now it's satellite internet, and it's portable, and you can strap it onto the roof of your car and have all this stuff. Um, so and now I think there's some new phones coming out with where you can, if you lose all data, it will default to Starlink for data. Someone just told me that there's some beta thing happening. So there's a guy who comes from Australia who live streams. He's epic. His name's Daniel Shaw. He live streams all season, has all these Patreon supporters. For him, data is vital because he's trying to live stream and never drop. Like one of the worst things live streaming is dropping your signal all the time. And so he's got 3 or 4 different methods where they're all combining and using a device into one internet stream so he never really goes down. And so there is like a lot of equipment like that that you might want, mostly so that you can stay aware. And I also have like a Surface Pro in my truck where it's got radar up all times just in case like my phone died or I lost it or whatever. I still have that in the truck. So you have like kind of multiple things. And another thing that's really good is having friends and people that out there and talking to them and asking them like, "Hey, what do you see? Was this and that?" And kind of getting a good, you know, network of buddies that will, maybe they're on a different part of the storm. You're telling them, "Hey, dude, get over here. This is great." So there's a lot of of that kind of stuff. My friend has been like, "Dude, Mike, this storm is really weird. Tornado could drop. Like, this is a dangerous day. Like, make sure you're paying attention, stay out of the way of certain things." And so, we do a lot of that stuff. So um, it's for the most part, it's just like weather is, you can see it, what it's doing once you've been out there enough, and so being aware of it is, I think the biggest thing besides having all that stuff is to not get distracted by the beauty of it and lose situational awareness, which kind of did. I think it was after the Iowa thing. I had those two guys from China and then the guy from Australia, and we were this beautiful wheat field with this epic supercell coming at us, and I started taking pictures of them to give them memories because this is beautiful. And then all of a sudden, like, I look and I realized I can see the farmhouse a mile down the road, and it just almost vanished from the storm. And I'm like, oh my God, the south side just exploded out of nowhere and picked up speed. And I'm like, get in, get in, get in. And we're all trying to throw tripods in. They're getting smashed indoors. And we finally get in. And I race and I go left because I thought I had an escape route. Well, it actually ended up dead ending.
Oh.
And I had to go back into a town and we got walloped by the storm. And then it went tornado warned, and a tornado did pop up around there briefly. And that was a time where I kind of lost a little bit of situational awareness because I was just so engrossed with the beauty of what I was seeing. So that really upset me that I did that. And so that's a rarity. That never ever happens because, I'm very, paranoid, zooming in on Google Maps, looking, does this road connect? Is it paved? Is it, is there a bridge where it might be washed out, or it might not exist or something. So there's so many of those things that we, kind of track all the time.
'Cause that can quite easily become the danger, isn't it? It's like you're so, trying to get the shot, and then you just lose situational awareness, and before you know it, you're in the thick
Yeah,
of
I
it.
mean, that's what's happened to multiple chasers recently. I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of maybe the younger crowd. I don't wanna be a crotchety old man, but, because I was,
Those
crotchety old
TikTokers.
chasers. Yeah, but there's a lot of streamers where I've seen people streaming storms on, like, Twitch, like they're playing a video game, and even how they're talking to their audience is like, "Thanks for the donation, blah, blah, blah." Like, "This is crazy, blah," kind of like they're playing a video game. But but I have seen where people get in a situation where they're so into it, and then they try to run, and it's too late, and they've gotten hit by tornadoes and, all these kind of things, and it seems to happen has happened a few more times recently. And so it's very easy to be distracted and to kind of let all that stuff get away. And that is where the danger is. You think you got an escape route and you didn't give yourself enough time, and then suddenly it's not good. And or it's not an escape route. The road ends in some guy's driveway at a farmhouse and you're screwed. So um I like you, I have 3 kids. I want to get back home, and I don't want I there's a lot of times out there I get pretty freaked out. Like I want to be safe. I don't have the no fear adrenaline rush that some of these guys do out there, that I totally respect the way they chase. They'll be right under a tornado and they just don't care. I care. So I don't want to get hit by a lightning bolt. I don't want to get destroyed by a tornado. So I think for me, it's healthy to have that kind of fear to keep myself from ever getting in too much of danger.
I think that's it's this a little bit like performing on stage. People who listen to this podcast will know this, but I used to have a career in music
Right.
before I got into photography. And the thing about performing live on stage in front of an audience, I always used to say, I'm not, I used to be quite nervous going on stage. I used to be on
Mhm.
like on edge, basically. And I used to like that because it keeps you on your toes. There's nothing worse than, getting to the point where you walk up on stage and you don't care
You
anymore.
don't care.
It's like,
Yeah.
because you lose focus and you
Yeah.
stop paying attention. And then that's usually when things go wrong, when you're a
Yeah.
little too comfortable,
Mhm.
and you're just not paying enough attention. You're not on the edge or on edge enough. And that's when you forget that you're going into a solo, or you just, get your
Yeah.
arrangements mixed up or whatever.
No, I think that's a very, it's kind of like, what I fear sometimes about myself, that I've been doing this for so long and I've had some success and seen so many good things that I end up being complacent because I'm like, "Oh, like whatever." And then I end up not trying as hard. And the moment you don't try as hard is the moment that you miss something great.
Yeah.
And so if you ever lose that it's the same thing. The moment you're like, "Ah, it's okay. I can," and I struggle with that because there's this real, in every artist, photographer would know the feeling of FOMO. If I don't go to this place, I'm gonna miss the Northern Lights. I mean, the Northern Lights have been visible here in Arizona multiple times in the last, like, year, and it's insane. And the amount of people going, "You're not going out to shoot it tonight?" And I'm like, "Man, it's like my off season. I wanna be home. I wanna read a book." But then there's that FOMO, if I don't
Yeah.
go out and do it. And then if
Yeah.
you do, and then, and so that's the thing with storms a lot, is FOMO. And my friend Brett always, he got real pissed a couple years ago because he and his girlfriend were driving out and they decided to stop in Amarillo for dinner. And we went out after a storm and it ended up being this nighttime structured beast that was barely moving. And when he started seeing photos of it, he's like, why did we not keep driving? Like, we could have been there just fine, but we stopped for steaks or something. And so
Yeah.
those are the kind of things. And that's something that I always worry about. I don't want to get to that point where I'm like, I don't care. I'm just going to sit here and eat.
Oh,
So
that exact thing happened to me, and I've told that story in the podcast to several times, just for reference. Um, my wife and I went up to um, the Canadian Rockies, and because my family used to live in a place called Canmore, which is right outside of some of the big parks, like
mhm,
Banff National Park. And
gotcha.
so one day we decided to drive up to Lake Louise, which is kind of the postcard vista. It's you've seen it a million times. It's the lake and then the mountains in the background. Da, da, da. And we drove up there. I think it was about I can't remember, like maybe a 2-hour drive from Kenmore, something like that. But we got there, and I was really hungry when I got there. I was like, "Oh, man." And there's a hotel on the right-hand side. This is a great burger place, right? And
Ooh,
you walk up to the place, and you're like, "Ooh, this smells good," right? And there's this one spot that everybody takes the same photo from. It's
yeah,
the tourist spot, right?
yeah,
And, I mean, it's you just there's so many places. You just go 50 yards to the left, and there's some awesome, vantage points that give you some different angles, and, I was just too hungry. There were
yeah,
burgers. I'm like,
yeah.
"Right, just gonna take the
That's
picture,
the
click, let's go eat." And then, when we got back home, that
mm,
night, I'm looking at my images and thinking, "Oh, man, I wish I would've eaten before we got there
yeah, yeah,
because, I would have been able to focus more on what I was trying to do." And of course, we for the most part, we're over here in Europe, and it's not just as easy as like, I'm going back
yeah,
on Saturday.
yeah.
This is just a missed opportunity, unfortunately. But
Yeah,
next time.
it's really funny because we goof on, a lot of chasers. We have, like, a couple friends who are like, "The tornado didn't happen like it was supposed to, it busted, I'm going to dinner." And it'll be, like, 6 o'clock, and I'm like, "What? There's, like, 5 hours of chasing left, like, this it's gonna be epic, there's lightning, it'll be nighttime structure." And I never stop really. Especially if I'm by myself, I will go until it's, and I don't care about food. I have like I'll eat at gas stations and not care, where there's some people who are like, no, I'm going for a nice dinner. I'm like, I don't care about food when I'm out. All I have is McDonald's for breakfast and like a Subway sub that I split up during the day, and then a couple snacks in the car. So I can't, for me at least, I can't worry about food. I got to get the shot.
Well, it's all about being prepared, though. This is the thing.
Yeah.
It's the devil is in the preparation, really. This is what I've learned. Um, similarly, chasing the Northern Lights with Dave Williams. It's all about being prepared. Yeah, I remember so many times, we'd be sitting at dinner, and these things develop relatively quickly. You might look at the data and you're like, "Oh, it doesn't look like anything's happening," and it's something happens. There's a hole in the clouds, and just where because the aurora is really happening all the time. It's just that sometimes you have cloud cover, and of course, sometimes the solar flares are more intense than other times. Um, and it might just be we might just be at dinner, and then literally he'd be like, "Right, we're gonna be in the van in 20 minutes, because in 45 minutes, 20 minutes from here is when it's
Yeah.
gonna happen, and we need to
Yeah.
be there at that moment, to photograph it."
No, I one of my best ever lightning shots was in 2015, and nothing really had happened. I was going to bed, and I was in bed, and then I rolled over and picked up my phone and looked one last time at the radar and saw a storm east of town moving kind of west towards Phoenix, and I'm like, "I don't know what's gonna make it." I'm already in bed, and I go, "If this moves over here, I could go get a shot at a place I want." And I got back up, packed up, and went out there and was out till 1 in the morning and got, even to this day, one of my best lightning shots of all time over the, Superstition Mountains. And it was, one of those last minute things where you have to constantly be on your toes even when you're going to bed for the night. You're like, "Am I really done for today?" And, you check it, and you gotta go back out.
Lightning photography is something that's really always fascinated me, mainly because I don't really know how to do it. Like, I mean, technically, how do you photo I mean, my camera isn't fast enough, I don't think, but how do
No, it
you
doesn't matter.
capture?
That's what everybody says, but it's really the slower it is the better chance you have of capturing lightning because at night it's long exposures, not fast. And during the day, it's different. During the day, you still want a slow shutter speed because you want to, much delay as you can without blowing out your shot. You're going to get a bolt from either time lapse or like a lightning sensor device. Um, but it's really tough. I always have people ask me, "What's your settings?" For lightning, and what lens? And I'm like, dude, I have like a 30-minute, couple 30-minute tutorials on all the different ways that you can shoot lightning because literally you can shoot lightning during the day all the way through blue hour to sunset to nighttime to distant lightning with the Milky Way. Like, what setting do you want me to talk about? Because there's a million different settings for it. Really, the hardest part is being there and being in the right place and knowing what's going to happen and knowing your surroundings and praying that, you don't blow out the shot and that you're in focus and that that you kind of know what you're doing because, out here in Arizona, like there's so much, there's storms and there's patterns and things kind of go over, but knowing the right spots, having scouted and chased for, out here for like 15 years, I know the spots I like to go to. I know where I can find open terrain. I know where I can get a clear view of something. Um, so being on the storm at the right time is like probably like 70% of the work. The rest is like, okay, I gotta know what my setting should be here. And then that's tough because you could have the perfect setting for my lightning bolt, and then all of a sudden one lands a mile closer and blows out your whole shot. And that would have been the shot of the day, but you wished you would have been at F11 instead of F56 or something. And, it's hard. It's really hard for people who maybe only get a chance to do it once in a while, once a year. You get the experience of getting out there and doing it, 30, 40 times a summer is where you can really learn. And it's a tough skill.
I mean, is it a question of basically knowing where these lightning bolts are going to be, or I mean, is there anything you can do to attract lightning? I mean, other than like
No,
wearing a
well, that would be
tinfoil hat or something.
great. Yeah. No, I mean, I seem to attract lightning because I've almost gotten struck multiple times,
Wow.
um, but no, I mean, I'm sure there's something out there you could, if you had enough money, you could set up something out somewhere and try to attract it when a storm comes by. They do generate lightning in certain places where there's storms go over and they have like a tower set up where they can actually attract it and stuff. But really, it's more about like positioning, knowing maybe what the lightning has been like that night. Most of the time out here, 95% of the time when you're shooting like a monsoon thunderstorm, the lightning comes out where the rain is coming out. So you got a nice big mushroom cloud, you got the rain falling, and you aim there, and lightning is going to strike all around that rain. Well, every now and then you get a bolt that comes out the top of these thunderstorms and strikes away from the rain, like clear air bolts is what we call them. And those, like, if you're not aimed wide enough to get that, maybe you're focused more in the rain, you're going to miss that. So, I have 3 cameras, usually a couple time lapse and another one doing stills. And so I will be aiming at a storm sometimes with the 50 and then shoot it wide in case that happens. It doesn't happen very much, but then there's some nights where like we were out leading the tour group around and there were clear air bolts happening all over the place. I don't know why on this particular night it was happening, but it seemed like for the few days around then that was happening. So I made sure to aim wide because I'm like, this might, and boom, I got this crazy shot that came out the top and landed way closer than all the other ones were. And so it's crazy. And so those are the things that are, you just have to, you kind of know the tendencies. If you have a storm coming at you, that's where you're probably going to end up getting a lot of your best lightning strikes. If you're behind a storm and it's going away, that's where the rain gets left behind. It's murky, it's ugly, it's not going to be, the bolts are not going to be as great. So it's all, experience and positioning and all that. And then getting your settings right on the fly, learning how to focus in the dark, it's a million things.
What I love about um, a lot of kind of landscape, I use the word landscape shots in the broadest sense.
Mhm.
But say Milky Way shots, for example, I find super fascinating because it's not really just about the Milky Way, but it's also about everything else, the foreground and
Mhm.
the way it's positioned. Um, do you have like a favorite spot um, for storm photography?
Well, in general, I am very, I would say, kind of minimalistic in my style. I like to be maybe high up, and I like to have kind of a wide open foreground. I don't necessarily like distracting things. I've been trying to break that habit a little bit with getting sunken in more to like saguaro landscapes. I got a nice shot this year, and with a couple saguaros and big bolts behind everything, and nice sunlight and stuff. And so I've been trying to do that because I know in general there's like an appeal for, clients who want art on their walls that's not just a lightning bolt, but also like the Arizona landscape and stuff. And so I trying to do that more. But storms, to me, seeing how they're impacting the terrain around them is what's fascinating. So when I can have a clear view or I can be up high and I can get that, when you see where a lightning bolt actually hits, it turns your photo into like more of a 3D effect, even though it's a 2D photograph. You have mountains in front of you and you're high up and you see a bolt strike in front of that mountain and you see the landing point where it hits. It just changes everything. And once you start getting those, you don't want shots where a bolt lands behind a mountain and you don't see where it lands. I mean, I would just gladly delete almost every one of those, even though some people would be like, that's my dream shot. No, like if I don't get to see the landing point or I don't have some reason that it's okay that I don't see it because the cactus or the foreground's really nice, then get really picky. So I tend to like, and doing time lapse especially, because I'm doing both at the same time. So there's a little bit of a difficulty where if I was just doing still photographs and that was it, I would probably be a little more courageous to go and shoot in front of, farmhouses, windmills, trees, and things like that. But doing time lapse, there's a lot of also licensing opportunities that come with these clips where I license to commercials, TV shows, nature documentaries, all those kind of things. Whereas if you got a bunch of stuff in the foreground, they're probably not going to use that shot. They really want
Oh.
sometimes to be able to, like a car commercial, they want to take. I have a commercial back in the day where it was the president from the show 24. I can't remember President Palmer. He was the Allstate guy, and he's sitting in a chair with his deep voice talking about this. And one of my time lapses is just going behind him with the clouds racing by. And if I had a house or a tree or something in the way, they wouldn't have used it. They used it because they could put it on the back of their screen and have nothing interfering with it. So I'm not like going out and time lapsing for commercials for sure, but that's kind of my style anyway. So when I'm time lapsing, I'm usually looking for unimpeded foreground. I'm looking for no other people in the shots, no chasers, things like that. So then my photographs end up being that way too. So um, it just depends, but that's more my style. I like to see down a little bit. I like to see where the rain's hitting. I like to see the lightning hits. I don't like if I'm driving on a dirt road and there's a storm to the west and there's like this low hill between me and the storm that rises up where I feel like I can't see the base of the storm, then I just keep driving. And if it's no good, I turn around and try to find another road or something. Like I very picky about those kind of things and what I like.
That's actually super interesting because, I didn't really think about that, but of course, the licensing aspect makes
Mhm.
perfect sense, because
Yeah.
there's a situation where you're shooting with intent. In the same way that I think there's sort of a disconnect between, what you see on social media very often, like on LinkedIn. Who looks at LinkedIn? Instagram is what I was
I
gonna say.
don't. Yeah.
Whoever
Or
looks at LinkedIn.
TikTok or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the kind of stuff you see, for instance, on Instagram a lot, um, if ever I see another bloody landscape picture with somebody in a yellow raincoat in the front, I wanna kill myself,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be honest,
Yeah. Well, though, the difference is a lot of, it's just different motivations and different goals. Their strategy is to be an influencer and to grow a following, and so they have to be in all the shots because that's their whole point is they are influencing and it's about them and their brand. For me, it's a little bit about my brand. I mean, I use my name for my photography, whereas some people will, a lot of people come up with names for their photography business, and then I never know who they are because I don't remember their names other than their business and stuff. And so So I'm kind of my brand, but I'm not shooting to get myself in the shot. I'm shooting to get stock footage like I've been doing. It all started in 2011 where I got a big dust storm, which is this one right behind my head, um, that hit Phoenix, and that was this historic dust storm in 2011, and I got a time lapse of it, and it went viral, and it was everywhere, and people were licensing it for things, and that's when I, kind of first realized that was actually something that people did. I got into weather photography and time lapse because I just love it. I didn't get into it for like a goal of really making money, other than like, oh, I could sell some prints. And then when this happened, and I time lapsed it, and I was, getting Nat Geo asking Al Gore, license it for climate change talks, and I would like, couple $1,000 here and there for those kind of things. I was like, whoa, I didn't know that people paid for stuff like this. And so that's what I kept. So then I started doing that more and more and more. And so that's what I still do to this day. I mean, there's like a Netflix show coming out soon. I don't know if it's the Americas or what. I'm talking to a few different people, but there's a Netflix show coming out with like 5 episodes. I've got like a minute worth of time lapse spread out across all the episodes, and it's stuff that's newer even in the last couple years. Um, so for me, I do like that's what I'm really shooting stuff. My intent has always been for that, because I still licensed through. I use Film Supply. I've been with them for like 6, 7 years now, and they license my footage all the time. And so that's kind of my goal on top of like, but I really like to make these films, and I like to put them to music and all that stuff. It's kind of my mission, which is luckily my passion and desire to do this lined up with a way to, help earn a living.
But again, that's super, that is super interesting because that's not necessarily something you'd sort of consider right off the bat in the beginning, because you think like, oh, well, these are awesome, awesome images. I mean, they might look good on. First of all, I mean, nowadays people probably think they'd look great on Instagram, and then from that, well, they'll make a great print or something. But again, this whole idea of licensing that to like, production companies or, TV shows or news corporations or whatever, it makes perfect sense to create now that I'm thinking about that, this you gave me a really good idea because I'm gonna go back to Norway in about a month or so, a month and a half. Huh.
Well, the
Huh.
one thing that I will say, like for me at least, is I think licensing stock footage and stuff like this is probably really difficult. I think with the niche I'm in, there's not very many people doing it. There's a few, and also it's really time consuming. It's cost a lot of money, all the driving, and then the post work it's just insane amount of work you have to do, and then storage and like all these things. And I've seen people give it a shot, but they don't keep at it very long because it's pretty difficult. It's like what I was just talking about with the whole, if I was just taking photos, what I could do differently if I wasn't time lapsing, like the discipline that I have to time lapse something is excruciating sometimes because I want to move, or I want to be somewhere else, or I want to be closer to a tornado. Like the one I got a quarter mile away from last year, I was time lapsing this tornado, and I probably could have kept doing it. I could have stayed where I was and shot it a little longer. I might end up with cars in the shot, but I'm like, dude, I never had Mike, you never have this opportunity to be this close to a tornado and drive right up to it. And my whole bread and butter is getting time lapses of these things. And I just said, screw it. I'm driving up to this thing today. I'm going to get a shot. And that's all I'm going to worry about. And it's what it took for me to drive away from like a time lapse opportunity to drive right up in the hail and rain and get a shot down the middle of the road, knowing I couldn't time lapse it from there. And so people, I think, do give up a little bit because it takes a lot of discipline, and it's frustrating a lot.
Time lapsing is super interesting. We've covered time lapses on the podcast in the past. I just find it. I I love time. It's such an interesting thing because it's a little bit like macro photography to me, where you you create. What's the best way to put that? It's almost like you'll see something that you've seen many times before in a completely different
Mhm.
light, quite literally, where you sort of it's almost like an alternate reality, you know?
Yeah, it's I the thing that's been really fun for me is that, that we have the National Weather Service over here with offices in like all these cities across the country, and they do training, like spotter training, to teach people how to report severe weather. What are they looking for? So they use a lot. I mean, a lot of them use a lot of my sometimes my photographs, but a lot of time lapse to show people what they're looking at. Like this is a rotating supercell. You can see it's in the time lapse. You can really see it spinning. In person, sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. It's just like a bubbling cloud. You look at it and you go, I know it's moving, but it's hard to see. And then you see it on time lapse, and it's like, and especially this dust storm behind me. My whole goal with that was to get it on time lapse to see what it looked like, kind of sped up in a different way, and seeing the interaction between the wall of dust and then the cloud above it and how they move together and how the dust would curl up and almost turn into clouds when it hit the certain layer was incredible. And that, that came up with or that helped me come up with this idea that like a dust storm is like food coloring in the atmosphere, because really that's what the wind is doing anyway. You just can't see it most of the time. A dust storm is like someone put food coloring in the air and you can see how it's rolling away from a thunderstorm, an outflow boundary and stuff. And so time lapse shows you things that make you really see, especially if the sky is liquid and there's just moisture everywhere, and that's all it is water vapor and how it moves, and it's fascinating. It's really really cool, and I think a lot of people see it and get blown away by it.
So with time lapsing, what interests me always is like just practically, how do you create time lapse of these storms? What's like, do you use special cameras, or how do you actually do it?
I'm still using my older Canon 5 DSRs because they're 50 megapixels. They're able to do 1 second intervals, and it's just been like really good, like sharp and good go to. Also, less issues with dust spots with them compared to like a mirrorless tends to get a little more dust spots on them if you're not really, really up on it all the time. But I was gonna upgrade to one of the I have the Canon R5 as well for kind of stills and stuff, and I've actually been using that to time lapse tornadoes because with the CF Express card or whatever it is, CF Fast, I can't remember, but um, I can lock my intervalometer down on the external intervalometer and do like 3 shots a second without it ever buffering, and so I can get every second like a tornado is in existence, I can get 3 shots of it, whereas with my other cameras, I can only do 1 shot a second, and so then I can compile it in the 30 frames a second, and I'm getting way more like resolution and shots of it than I would otherwise. So whenever I see a tornado and I want to time lapse it, I kind of will use that as well for that, which also stinks because then I really don't have any still cameras that I'm shooting with. They're all time lapsing, um, but yeah, I've been using that. So, but mostly just, I haven't had a chance. I wanted to upgrade last year, and then my freaking taxes were more than I thought they would be, and I had planned to buy a couple more cameras. I'm like, I guess I'll just keep using these for a while. They're still working. They're awesome. They're tough. They don't break. And I have all the gear and lenses for them. So, for me, I've never been much of a gear head. I'm not much of a technical guy either. I really love storms and weather, and I want to use this technology to capture it, but I don't necessarily get into all the nitty gritty details. And I got to have the best thing, and I got to do this and that. Long as it's kind of sharp and I can, have enough resolution and dynamic range to do what I want, I really don't care. So, but I wouldn't mind, a little bit more dynamic range and a little faster intervals, in the future. So hopefully I'll be able to kind of upgrade them at some point. But yeah, you don't, it's kind of like with everything. I mean, you don't want to get out there and time lapse with your phone because you're not going to be able to you can for your um, you know, social media kind of videos and stuff. You're not going to, get high quality licensable, kind of footage with it. But
Yeah.
the thing is, you still might. I'm sure Apple would love to license a good time lapse of a storm shot on their phone, like, but the bottom line is like you can kind of go out and time lapse with almost anything. And so for me, it's more about how I'm capturing it, positioning, interpreting it, how I'm chasing, how I'm trying to get on the right storms. And that's what is more important to me than like maybe the gear, I guess. So
Well, also, if I think in a situation like that, if you know the gear that you have, you're going to be able to get better results than
yeah.
It's one of the things I've noticed. So I used to shoot for the longest time. I used to shoot with a Nikon Z6 II, which is
Mhm.
24 megapixel camera. It does everything I needed to do and a million things more that I never need. Um, but I took that to the Fulton, and it really did a great job. I got some really great shots of the northern lights and of landscapes and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. It really was, it was very cool. Um, but I dropped it not too long ago, and that wasn't
Sucks.
a good thing.
No.
And so I was kind of forced to upgrade. And, I upgraded to the Nikon Z8, which has a lot of features that would come in really handy with, so, like, it has a shot, like, what do you call it? Like um, it's like a sensor shield. So this is
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That R5 has that too, a curtain that covers it when you
Yeah,
power it off.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's really good when it comes to, like, sensor spots and everything. But it also has this starlight mode sort of a thing. I've no real idea what it actually does. Oh, I admit that it's not something I've looked into, but apparently it's super awesome for photographing skies and whatever the
Yeah.
heck it does. Again, it's like one of these things I'm really going to get into before I go back to Norway,
Yeah.
just so I know. But it's a thing, it's just a lot more complicated than the first time I went because now I have to learn all this additional stuff. You know,
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with I don't, not want a newer camera. I mean, I was using 5D Mark IVs to shoot weddings, like, forever because I had 2 of them, they were the same, but this fall, I got tired of, like, kinda missing focus a little bit on some of them, so I started using my R5 to shoot weddings, and I'm like, "Oh my god, like, I should have 2 of these because it
yeah,
just will automatically lock on a face, and it's fast focus, and it's sharp." Like, it was so much better. So, I've always been like, "Oh, I mean, Mark IVs were good for me for 6 years, they're still good for me, I don't need to upgrade because they still work." But then you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is way easier." Even time lapsing with the R5, I also use it not just for tornadoes, but I will use it at night if, like, there's a distant thunderstorm and I'm trying to get more of, like, ISO 3200 kind of stars and a flashy updraft from far away. I'm gonna use that because the, ISO noise and dynamic range is it's way less noise than it would be with the freaking 5 DSRs. If I get over 1,000, it starts getting pretty bad. So gear does help, and it does make things a little bit better and easier for sure. It's just, for me, it's more about like the storms and all that stuff than necessarily like trying to, like if I have the same cameras I've always had when I go out this spring, I'm not going to care one lick. Yeah, I might wish I had one thing a little better, but it's going to be fine.
exactly. That's really good news for people who want to get into doing something like that, whether it's time lapsing storms or whatever it may be, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go out and buy the latest and greatest gear. It basically means,
Right.
well, wait a minute, 10 years ago, people were making time lapses and they look great.
Yeah.
Same thing with just about anything. I mean, I had
Yeah.
exactly the same experience that you just described with the Z8, for example. I
Yeah.
used to shoot a Nikon D750 for the longest time. And I know a lot of people would have looked at that and gone like, "What, D750? That's not even a professional camera." Well, kind of worked
Yeah.
for me for 10 years.
Yeah.
I never had a client
For
that,
sure.
yeah, never had a client that would have paid me more just so I'd shoot it on
Yeah.
a different camera. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Um, but of course, the difference is things like the autofocus are nuts. I mean,
Yeah.
I
That part.
that
Yeah.
is just that's crazy.
Yeah.
The amount of shoots that I've done with that Z8 thing that is like where I didn't have a single shot out of focus, that just freaks me out,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, Unbelievable. So yeah, it makes your life easier, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible in any other way.
Yeah.
That's always that's the thing.
Well,
In fact,
especially if you're like people that want to learn how to or they're just getting into photography and learn and maybe chasing storms or northern lights or whatever, like, just get a camera that's used to go out and see if you really like it enough to really spend the money on it. Don't go,
Absolutely.
like, hog wild and get the top of the line gear and then find out, "Oh, this is a lot harder than I thought. I don't like it as much." Maybe just, don't feel like you have to have. I mean, when I first started, I my first camera was like a $600 Canon Rebel S XSI that was, I don't know,
Yeah.
it was 12 megapixels or whatever it was at the time, and that was my first camera, and I just started with it to see, and I'm like, "Okay, well, I might need something better. I want full frame," and eventually upgraded. You don't have to go to the very best, unless, of course, you got the money to, then I guess, go for it, but
Well, absolutely. Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, I started on like a Nikon crop sensor,
yeah.
a consumer camera, and
Mhm.
I had it for years, and it was super fun. I did a lot of really cool stuff with that. Absolutely no problemo. And
Yeah.
again, upgrading for the one thing I actually, so the one thing I realized was that the the benefits are really in the glass rather than in the camera body.
Mhm.
And that was I think for me that was the main thing, going from Nikon's DX system, so the APS-C crop sensor system, to the full frame system, was just simply that the lenses were better. Their offerings when it came to full frame lenses, the pro lens were just so much better. That's really where I noticed a lot of difference. Um, especially then when it came to, in the beginning, I used to shoot bands. Um, and so you're constantly in a low light situation, and I really noticed the difference there. And it
Oh,
wasn't so
yeah.
much the camera, but it's mainly the glass. Um, and so that I would say, like, if you spend your money, spend it on the glass
Yeah,
predominantly.
I mean, like, when I got these back when the 5 DSRs were kinda new, I had a friend named Martin, say, "If you're gonna get those and it's 50 megapixels, you need better glass because otherwise it's not gonna resolve those pixels are not gonna be as resolved as well." And so I had to I needed the Canon 11 to 24 that was like a $2,800 wide angle lens because it was so good. And yeah, that was like a lot of money, but man, paid off because it's just super sharp and it mattered. So sometimes you do have to do that. And but it's different though. For me, it's because I'm doing it professionally and I'm trying to make money from it. And so I'm gonna spend the money to invest in that. If you're just starting out, like you don't have to do that. Just take your time and see if you love it enough.
Also, if you do it professionally, you can write it off the tax. So that's another
Yes,
thing.
that also helps.
Every little helps. That's the thing. I know. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got this thing where, I've upgraded the camera, but I haven't upgraded any lenses, and mainly because they're freaking expensive.
Yes.
And so yeah, there would be some benefits of, like, for me to upgrade to, like, the latest in, I don't know, Z glass, whatever.
Yep.
Um, it's, but the reality is, it's again, I can do everything that I need to do with the glass that I have. It's absolutely no problem. It's everything's easier anyway because there are advantages to the body. But there's no real actual need other than my ego, maybe. You know,
Mhm.
and there are
Yeah.
lots of reasons that speak against it. My bank balance being one,
Yeah. Yeah.
for
I mean,
example.
there is one of those things when you're doing it, professionally that you almost feel like this responsibility to be using the latest stuff to be, especially if you're doing, I put out a master class and this stuff, but if I was using like 20-year-old camera stuff, people are like, well, this doesn't help me. Like, why aren't you using new stuff? And so whatever. I mean, you don't have to. You do whatever you want. But there does feel like a little bit of a, oh, I should have the latest and greatest, so I'm up to date on what's going on. Also, I'm doing this professionally, so I should make sure my footage that I'm shooting is the best possible quality that I can get.
Yeah,
Um, but
but
then
here's
when
the
you realize like I've been shooting like time lapse footage that's over 8K for like 8 years, like okay, it's not like I can get much better. I could get a, I don't know, what a phase one, or I could get a Hasselblad with like 100 megapixels and spend gobs of money and try to get like 12K, 16K footage, but I don't know that anyone's gonna ever use that. And if it's too much, so there's just this kind of limit where you have to be like, but this is fine, for now. So
Yeah, absolutely. And plus my counter argument to the, like, so I'm a professional, that's why I need to use like the
yeah.
latest gear. So I think Because I get that a lot when when people see me running
Mhm.
around, filming or whatever, um, especially in places like I just come back from Imaging USA, and people realize, oh man, that's an ancient Nikon lens you've gone there. It's like, yeah, sure, but it works, right? You see my
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
It's like because
You
ultimately that's kind of what it boils down to you know, is that thing where in terms of portrait photography, for example, which is the thing that I do during the day. Um, it, you know, ultimately, it's your work that
Yeah.
that matters. And as I always say, my argument to this is always this. Oh, I get this in camera clubs a lot. This is funny. So
Yes.
I get it in camera clubs a lot, where because camera clubs is this funny thing where you have um, enthusiasts, let's say, who are usually a little bit older. I mean, let's face it, the average age in a camera club, especially over here in the UK, is like 70 and beyond. So usually people that are
Yes.
retired, they've had a
Yep.
career, they've maybe, they've got a little bit of money on the side. They can afford, as soon as like Canon or Nikon or Fuji or whoever, Olympus, brings out a new camera body, they can go and buy the latest thing, and that's
Yeah.
cool. And I don't know, maybe that helps them to photograph birds or something on sticks. I have no
Mhm.
idea. But one of the comments I often get is like, "Oh, how come you like you shoot on such an old lens or an older body and stuff?" And my argument is always like, "Well, because actually I'm running a business, so this this gear needs to pay for itself,
Yeah.
and I need to have a justification to upgrade.
Yeah.
If a client, the next time a client says to me, "I'm going to pay you more for the
Yeah.
shoot because you've shot it on a Z8 rather than a Z6 II. That to me might be an argument to upgrade, but that's never happened
Yeah.
before.
No, and
You know?
there's definitely filmmakers and videographers I know that are like, you know, they're commercially, filmmake do commercial filmmakers where they want like the client may want them to shoot it on a red, or they may demand, I'm really good friends with Dustin Farrell, who has a Phantom Flex that he shoots slow-mo lightning. He just shot the Starlink SpaceX rocket launch in slow mo, and it's insane. So
Yeah.
when he gets asked for jobs, they want that camera. Like
Sure.
they're asking for a specific camera. But for the most part, like, you know, clients just want a photo, and they may tell you, I want it to be able to print like this big, or I may, whatever, and you have
Yeah.
to have the right, equipment to do it. So
Sure. And of course, in that world, if I have a specific job that comes in that's very, very specific in that respect,
yeah,
it's more cost effective for me to hire that gear for this
yeah,
particular job rather
yeah.
than
No,
to
yeah, that's what
pay
you
for
would
it.
do anyway, because they usually charge the client for the gear rental anyway, even
Yeah.
if it's your own. So
Well, yes, and
yeah,
that's an accounting trick I haven't figured out
yeah, yeah,
just
I
yet.
know. Well, I mean, I know, like, my friend Dustin, I don't know if he's done yet, but he was still paying off the camera, and it was making him gobs of money, but he's still paying it off. So when he has a commercial shoot, they pay to rent the camera, because it's still like a business. Like, you want this camera, you gotta pay for this camera,
Yeah.
kinda thing. So
It's
yeah,
like, this is a thing I've learned not too long ago, that, I think I might need to put into action because I haven't done that, and maybe that's, you know,
yeah.
I'm
Maybe, I don't know. I don't do a lot of commercial stuff. I do more like weddings and things like that where, if I really got into that, that would be something to definitely
yeah.
investigate. But definitely no one at weddings is paying me extra to have a certain amount of equipment. I have the funny little 24 millimeter Olympus lens that's like 30 years old that I have an adapter for one of my cameras because it's really good wide angle dancing and it's super sharp. And I always will get a amateur photographer walking up to me at a reception going, "What lens is that on your camera?" And they always are like, "What are you using, dude?" And I'm like, "Just $100 cheap lens I got on eBay, and it
Yeah.
makes great photos," So
Well, that's
it's
it,
funny.
and yeah, absolutely, and that's there's so many examples for it. In fact, actually, just talking about Nikon again, it's just because I know Nikon as a brand, I know it a little bit better, because I use it all the time. But they just brought out a 2 mil Z lens, a 40 millimeter Z lens. It's a really cheap and cheerful lens. I think it's like let it be $200 maybe.
Yeah.
Um, it's plastic. It's sort of the equivalent of a cheap and cheerful Nifty 50.
Yeah,
You know,
51.8, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's that kind of is equivalent. It's a beautiful lens. Actually, a really cool lens. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is. I think it ships standard with the ZF or something. So it's great for street photography, street
Yeah.
portraits, that sort of thing. Um, but it's actually a fantastic little
Mhm.
lens. There's no real reason. I mean, yeah, it's made from plastic and blah blah blah. But as far it's like,
Yeah.
okay, if something goes wrong with that, you haven't really burned thousands of dollars either,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
fairly so yeah, I mean, sometimes that might just be the best choice. Um,
Yeah.
so, what's the sort of storm season, or is it like a season through the year?
Yeah, I mean, it kinda depends, but mostly here, the tornado season is late March, towards the end of June, but the heart of it is usually May and June. Gas price has been high, and I run the storm photo contest through, where we kind of the winners get selected end of March, and so I'm not shooting as many weddings as I was, but when I was, a lot of April weddings, so I usually wait to go out till May, and then I get, like, 2 months to chase. Usually, May and June is when it's less grungy. Earlier in the year, it's a little colder, the storms might be a little lower base, a little grungier, where later they get more photogenic, slower moving, like in June and stuff like that. So, May and June, I'm usually out on the plains chasing that, tornadoes and supercells, and then the monsoon kicks off in Arizona around, early July. So once June is over, basically come home, and then I chase the monsoon, here all around Arizona for like the next 3 months until, September kind of thing. So, it works out really well for me. Usually by the end of June, I'm drained of all the driving and chasing, and I'm ready to be home, and definitely getting older. I just turned 50 like last week, and it definitely, my kids are getting older. There's a lot of sports. There's a lot more of being on the road a lot gets exhausting, and so sometimes I am like, I don't want to chase tonight. I need a break, kind of thing. So, um, but it doesn't matter. I had a storm last year where I had taken like a Advil PM to try to help me go to sleep. And then a storm popped up down south, and I still got in the car and drove an hour down to Casa Grande and had an epic lightning storm till 2 in the morning, even though I was, dog tired and just wanted to go to bed because I am addicted to this and I can't help it. So,
Have you noticed, like, over the years, have you noticed any sort of a change? I mean, I'm thinking in terms of, like, climate change or something. Is there something
um,
that's been happening?
yeah, I mean, I notice like patterns. I mean, climate change, for the most part, people want to say that, or people will say it's not one storm that you're like, oh my gosh, this is climate change, as much as it's like an overall shift in pattern change. And at least for me, I just noticed things have been different, like with the monsoon, where it's hasn't been as active, or Phoenix used to get a little bit more weather. We'd get more dust storms hitting downtown, like that shot up over my shoulder is a dust storm hitting downtown Phoenix, and it used to happen a lot more. And now I was trying to get one for the last Planet Earth that just came out. For like 3 or 4 years, they wanted to get a really big dust storm over downtown Phoenix, and we were 3 summers in a row trying to get a good one, and it never happened. And I'm like, I was told them it will happen at least once in a summer and over a couple of years. So I just noticed things like that that have been a little different. And then tornado season on the plains. Lately, it feels like the earlier part of the season might even be better. Like, it used to be the end of May, early June was like peak season. That was when you wanted to chase. And then now it seems like I've been getting maybe better stuff in earlier May and stuff like that. And the season might start earlier. So, um, and it's drier, stuff like that. So it's hard to know for sure, but I feel like I see some kind of just overall things, change. The monsoon already is hard to predict. So sometimes it's like, well, you just don't know what it's going to be like anyway. So it's really hard to know if I'm actually seeing a pattern, or is it just the way the monsoon is, but it feels more like a pattern to me.
And, now things are gonna be changing anyhow, especially with all of that air and the moisture that's coming in, over, or that used to come in over the Gulf of Mexico. Now that it's called the Gulf of America, who
Yeah,
knows?
it's
Everything might be different.
probably a lot drier now. So for
It's
sure.
it's gonna be bigger and better, apparently.
No. Oh,
Oh, man. Cool. Man, it's been an absolute pleasure. having you on the
Yeah.
show. Thank you so much. It's super fascinating. I'm telling you, it's like I'm super fascinated by the whole storm
You might need to
chasing
come
thing.
out sometime and do it.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode. It was awesome having Mike on the show. But before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll like. Check out episode 241 with Jake Hicks. I'm sure you love it. If you enjoy this content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us keep bringing you more amazing episodes. And again, I don't really know why I keep saying us. It's really just me. So it really does mean the world to me. And for those of you listening on audio, did you know that there's a video version of this podcast over on YouTube? You should by now because I keep mentioning it all the time. So you'll get to see our guest's stunning photography in full Technicolor. Just head over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you can watch all of this awesome photography. And of course, all of our past episodes on that too. And if you're already there, be sure to drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement does help us reach more people across the globe. Thanks again for listening and watching. And remember, a new episode drops every Thursday. So make sure you mark that in your calendars, diaries, whatever your kids use these days. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.